We're just going straight into it today. Okay, we're just going straight into it today. It says sending data. I don't know if I'm connected yet. I'm connected on YouTube. That's good. Waiting to be connected on Twitch. Waiting on that connection. And I'm live on both platforms. You may notice I cancelled my affiliate contract. So you can no longer sub to me, and my emotes, they are gone. But it means I can now multi-stream, which hopefully will grow my audience quicker, although I don't get any views on YouTube. You know, it's only a matter of time though, okay? It's only a matter of time. I'll just, I'll keep spreading myself as much as I can over the internet. We're late today. I'm about 20 minutes late. I was eating, and I don't know, I was watching some stuff. I just couldn't be bothered to start at 5. It's not like anybody's waiting on me. People thirsty for the Sneaky Debate Man stream at 5 PM GMT every day. Anyway, Gaunt Navalny attacks Putin as network is disbanded. So they've shown footage of Navalny now after his hunger strike. He doesn't look great. Let's have a look into this, because we've been following this whole drama for quite a while now. Navalny's appearance via video link from a penal colony was his first since he ended a long hunger strike. So he stopped his hunger strike. He was on hunger strike for quite a while due to his treatment from the Russian people. The Russian people, well, from Putin, I should say. Alexei Navalny has appeared in court from prison, head close-shaven and face gone. I wonder if he shaved his own hair. I very much doubt it. I bet that's like standard procedure in Russian prisons. And accused Vladimir Putin of attempting to rule Russia forever and only care about clinging to power. Yeah, I think that's probably about accurate. And I think something that's often misconstrued about Navalny is he's pretty bad, yeah. His opinions, they're not great. But he doesn't want power, and that's kind of important, right? He's not great, but he doesn't want the power. He simply just wants to show that Putin is really corrupt. Is it the opposition politician's first public appearance since starting a 2.5-year jail term, seen as punishment for the fierce criticism of the Kremlin? Navalny spoke via video link, his prison kit hanging loosely after a recent 24-day hunger strike over his treatment. I wonder if he's got like internal issues now, because when you go on hunger strike, you get like emaciated organs, don't you? It's not just like you get really hungry and then you eat some food and you get back. Like it breaks down your insides on a cellular level, and sometimes you can't recover from that. But apparently he's receiving vitamin treatment. His language was robust as ever. President Putin was a king with no clothes, he said, who was robbing the people and depriving Russians of a future. Russians were being turned into slaves. The judge who rejected Navalny's appeal against a fine for defaming the Soviet World War II veteran who had appeared in a pro-Kremlin video, Navalny said his weight in jail had fallen to 72 kilograms, 11.3 stones, the same he had weighed in school. I think that's a little bit lighter than me. I feel like that's not that light, right? I'm like 74, like 75, something like that. I feel like that's not... It's not a light. I mean, I don't want him to like die or anything, but I don't know. Doesn't seem that light to me. I doubt he's much taller than me. I'm 6'3". It's pretty uncommon to be much taller than me. Because he's just a heavier set person than I. A pro-Navalny mural was rapidly painted over after appearing overnight in St. Petersburg. Not surprising. Not surprising. They pretty much want to shut that shit up as quick as possible. But even as the Kremlin critic spoke, another court across Moscow was discussing a petition by the prosecutor to ban all his political organizations as extremist. I guess you could call them extreme. Yeah, it's just the kind of extremism that we agree with. Anticipating the court's ruling, Navalny's right-hand man, Leonid Volkov, announced that some 36 Navalny headquarters were being disbanded to protect staff and supporters from prosecution. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that makes it look like Putin has won, though, doesn't it? The offices were set up in 2017 ahead of Navalny's attempt to challenge Vladimir Putin for the presidency. He was barred from even joining the race. Wow, that's not good, is it? When you can't even compete against a power, that's very scary. On Monday, the Moscow prosecutor suspended all activity by the offices pending the court decision. The activities of Navalny's Anti-Corruption Foundation, FBK, have also been restricted. To make it clear, this decision destroys our political organization in Russia, Leonid Volkov told the BBC this week. He was speaking from abroad, where he has lived since 2019 for safety as he faces multiple criminal charges himself. I wonder what the criminal charges levied against him are as well. I mean, they got Navalny on embezzlement, and it was a pretty flimsy claim. They basically just threw him away for anything they could. There is no way he continued to operate in this country, the activist said, adding that extremism laws carry punishment of up to 10 years in prison. Wow, now he's been labelled as an extremist. It's basically at least 10 years he would get. I mean, they'd probably just assassinate him, right? And they tried to assassinate Navalny a bunch of times. Why not just assassinate this guy as well? Navalny's number 2. Activists could face jail. The extremist branding would be toxic, as the Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia found out. Since the religious organization was outlawed in 2017 on the same grounds, almost 500 of its followers have faced criminal prosecution. Dozens are serving hefty sentences. Wow, the Jehovah's Witnesses are an extremist organization in Russia? Why did that happen? Why are Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia? After a local court ruled the organization guilty of inciting religious hatred by propagating the exclusivity and supremacy of their religious beliefs. Wow, that's very interesting. I wonder what they did to earn this scorn. I know the Russian government isn't above just shutting anything down they dislike under a false pretense. But I don't know. I wonder what happened there. I don't really like the Jehovah's Witnesses. They're kind of annoying, but I mean, I guess they should have the rights to practice their religious freedoms. So across Russia, staff who once worked for Team Navalny have rushed to clear out the offices and delete social media accounts and chats. In St. Petersburg, where supporters queued around the back 4 years ago, where politicians swept into town, his first regional headquarters, there is now no sign this team was ever there. Yeah. What can you say? Yeah, that makes sense. The front door of their office is shuttered. Inside there are a couple of chairs, a coat rack, and a printer gathering dust. And a coat. I guess this was the coat of the person who took the photo, though. Fear of prosecution. Irina Fatanyov, who ran Navalny's St. Petersburg's team until Monday, stresses that she has now severed all ties with the organization at risk of being labeled an extremist. But she says pressure from the authorities had increased steadily since January, when Alexei Navalny returned to Russia after recovering from a nerve agent attack in Siberia. Arrested on arrival, he has been behind bars ever since. Yes, he has. Since January, I don't think there's been one calm day when I don't worry about the knock on my door, or some criminal case, Irina confided, telling me she had been followed, detained, and had her house searched in recent weeks. But the extremism label takes the danger to another level. Wow. Yeah, they really don't fuck about, do they? They really don't fuck about. Searching a house, tracking her, making sure she's not engaging in, quote, extremist activities. The risks are high, but because we just don't know how this law will be applied, how hard they want to turn the screws. For me, destroying the whole political structure is already huge. Yeah. It's like this is like one issue when you have an authority like this, right? They can just apply the law however the fuck they like. There's no consistent standard, which means that essentially they can treat you how they like and call it legal. Irinya describes the move as a personal tragedy and now plans to try running for local election independently of Team Navalny. A plan Leonid Volkov suggests may be replicated across the country. So I guess they're not giving up. That's one interesting facet of this. They're just not doing it under the banner of Navalny anymore, which might be quite detrimental to their cause, because these names are much less known. Or at least to me. I don't know how well they're known in Russia. So that might hurt it. My face when I watch a Biden union, I come. I am on belay. What do you mean Biden union? Biden endorsed unions? I didn't see that. Things are frightening, but what happens if we're all scared off for any reasons? I don't want to let the next generation of eyes and be ashamed, yeah. But the strength of Alexei Navalny's movement was twofold: his charismatic leadership and the structure he put in place, supporting activists across the country. That's what I said, like, losing Navalny is like a big deal. It's a big deal. He was the memester that held it all together. Oh, the union address. The State of the Union, yeah. Called for a $15 minimum wage, praised unions, etc. Yeah, I know. Biden's pretty based, eh? I keep defending Biden, and you know what? I think rightfully so. People can be mad that I defend Biden, but I think I'm right. Mobilizing via social media, they have staged street protests, promoted anti-Kremlin candidates for election, and conducted anti-corruption investigations against top-level officials that have gone viral. But tolerance of their activities has ended. Yeah, they've been doing this for ages. I think they've been doing this for like 10 years or something like that. And it was like this thing that finally set it off, right? This was what really pissed off Putin. Like, videoing his home. In St. Petersburg this week, even a wall painting of Alexei Navalny lasted just 4 hours before police arrived, followed swiftly by municipal workers with a daffodil yellow paint. Within moments, Navalny's image was obliterated. Yeah, they weren't very happy about that. They weren't very happy about that at all. There's a nice mural though, eh? Well painted. So yeah, Navalny is he's alive. He ain't doing great, and his organization's disbanded, which it's very much looking like Putin's. Putin's won this one. Putin may have won this one. All right, let's have a look at some TLDR. We like a bit of TLDR. Can Scotland leave Britain and rejoin the European Union? But I think they can, right? We'll find out. I don't think there's anything
Hello
blocking
and
them.
welcome to another
first.
TLDR UK video. Scottish independence is always a contentious issue, and one we discussed a number of times on the channel before. But with Scottish parliamentary elections around the corner, renewed focus has been put on the issue. More specifically, there's a growing group of Scots who seemingly want to leave the United Kingdom, become independent, and then rejoin the European Union. So in this video, we're going to discuss just that. Would it be a good idea for Scotland to leave one union to join another? Before we start, I'm pleased to announce that because TLDR is growing, we're moving office into a new, bigger space. That means we have to move a lot of stuff though, so we're holding an office clearance sale. All of our merch is discounted, including all of our badges for only $3.99. But we're also selling office things, like our sofa and our fridge. No, seriously, we're selling them. So check out the store. If
usually I don't like people advertising on my channel,
it's
but
linked in the description.
I don't mind these guys, they're pretty cool.
In 2014 and 2016, two major referendums took place, which were set to fundamentally change Britain's political landscape and the status of the Union. Then Prime Minister David Cameron hoped that by holding referenda, both issues could be rejected and put to bed. The first time round, this strategy worked, with 55% of Scots rejecting independence. The second time was less successful though, with a now infamous 52% of Brits voting to leave the EU.
Yeah, and these Scots voted to stay in the UK on the basis that they thought the UK was going to stay in the EU. So this was heavily influenced by this, and this didn't go the way it wanted, and thus opinions have vastly changed on this one.
These two once-in-a-lifetime referendums might feel completely separate, but they are fundamentally linked. After all, when you break down how the Brexit vote went, a majority of Scots voted to remain in the EU, making them significantly more Europhile than their southern neighbours. However, with the majority of the UK voting to leave, Scotland also exited the EU in 2020, reopening the issue of Scottish independence and their place in both unions. The SNP are integral to this discussion. Having taken over from Labour as the driving left-wing force in Scotland, the SNP have relentlessly pursued independence in recent years, and the results of this upcoming election could feed that desire yet further. I don't
know, with the recent drama with Salmond, I don't know. The party's pretty fragmented, and I don't know if one party will get enough seats to make a significant push for independence. It's going to be quite difficult.
Currently stands, the SNP have 61 seats in the Scottish Parliament, 4 short of a majority, relying on the Greens to get bills through.
That's what I mean. They're already don't even have a majority, right? And they have to what's the word I'm looking for? What's it called where you get like two parties and they work together in government? A coalition. They already have to coalesce with the Green Party to get things through. And the recent fragmentation with Salmond is only going to make this more difficult. So I don't believe this is likely.
In the upcoming Scottish Parliament election, set to take place on the 6th of May, the SNP are expected to win again, with them currently almost 30 points ahead of the next largest party. And that's significant, because the SNP's leader, Nicola Sturgeon, plans to ask for a Section 30 order from the UK government. This would give the Scottish Parliament the power to pass a law that would normally be within Westminster's remit, allowing her to call another independence referendum. If the UK government refuses, her plan would be to try and force another referendum anyway, and defend the decision in court if the UK government actually tries to challenge.
Why should you invest in...
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if they just let them vote. In
January, Prime Minister Boris Johnson said on the Andrew Marr Show that the Scottish independence referendums should be a once-in-a-lifetime vote, and that the gap between the 1975 and 2006 EU referendums was a good sort of gap.
Yeah, he doesn't want that. Obviously, he wants Scotland in because it's a big part of power for him, right? It's another domain for him to rule over. It sounds very scary, but it is true, right? Having Scotland in the Union is good for England. So it makes sense that he would try and block their exit, right? But at the same time, he's going to be incredibly unpopular, and they're going to go for it either way. So it's kind of a futile effort.
Just how long he would expect Scotland to wait for another vote. The Guardian has also reported that Johnson said in private that the Conservatives will make clear that holding a Scottish independence referendum during the COVID pandemic would be irresponsible. However, while Johnson is reluctant to allow another independence referendum, it may reach the point where it's politically untenable for him to refuse one any longer.
That's what I said, yeah.
Former British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan once said that events, dear boy, events, are the biggest thing that knock a government off course. As we've seen with the coronavirus pandemic, no politician can perfectly plan for the future, and this may too be true for Scottish independence. Current polling isn't overly clear, but it suggests that if a referendum were to be called, it's possible that Scots could back independence. But what we likely do know is that such a campaign would be focused around Europe, and more specifically the EU. Back in 2014, a big part of the campaign at the time was the European Union. As the EU referendum hadn't been called yet, and it was still assumed that if it was, the UK would choose to remain, the argument was that if Scotland decided to leave the UK, then their position in Europe would be jeopardised too. In fact, the Better Together campaign produced a fact sheet on the EU, in which they claimed the UK is one of the most influential members of the European Union. This means that we don't just sit at the top table, we help make the decisions that affect so many parts of our life here in Scotland.
That's true,
essentially arguing that leaving the UK would mean leaving the EU. Looking back now, this seems ironic to say the least. In deciding to stay as part of the UK, it seems that Nicola Sturgeon's prediction from the 2014 referendum has proven to be correct.
You couldn't guarantee Scotland's continued membership of the European Union if we stayed as part of the UK, because there's going to be an in-out referendum. We could find ourselves in the position. We can find ourselves in the position where the UK as a whole votes to come out and we vote to stay in, and we get taken out against our will. You can't possibly defend that.
Everybody else is wrong on European Union membership apart from you.
But let's say, just hypothetically, that Scots did get a referendum and did vote for independence. What happens then? Can they just rejoin?
When there's a big war going on somewhere in the universe, that always reflects
in the EU. Well, Scotland might actually be a good fit for the EU. As The Economist points out, if it were to be admitted to the EU, it would be a mid-sized country comparatively, and would have many similar interests to other European nations, such as that of green energy and financial services. In fact, with the UK, Scotland was a member of the EU for decades. So, as Kirsty Hughes, the director of the Scottish Centre on European Relations, pointed out, it's hard to argue that an independent Scotland would be unlikely to be able to rejoin. After all, as long as Scotland hasn't diverged from the EU too much since leaving in early 2021, it should already be pretty aligned with the Union. The baseline criteria to join the EU are known as the Copenhagen criteria. These 4 criteria are an ability to demonstrate a stable governance, protection for human rights, a market economy, and the ability to adhere to the EU's political and economic aims. The first of these shouldn't be too difficult. Scotland has a government with distinct responsibilities. The second of these, again, shouldn't be too hard for the same reason. How many human rights abuses are you aware of Scotland making? The third should also be easy. And fitting with the theme, the last of these shouldn't be too difficult either, because as we said, Scotland's managed to adhere to the EU for...
Very interesting how you have to have a market economy to join the EU. Very, very interesting that. I mean, we often say like the EU is capitalistic in nature, but like you actually have to be somewhat capitalistic in nature just to join. That's very interesting. No decommodified countries joining the EU.
Nearly 40 years when they were members. But while they might fit the criteria, such a move wouldn't be easy. In order to actually rejoin the EU, Scotland must fully separate from the UK. And if you thought that the UK and EU were intertwined, well, wait until you see what it's like for the UK and Scotland. The UK was a member of the EU from 1973 to 2016. Scotland has been a member of the United Kingdom since 1707.
Goddamn.
Think of all the complexities around trade, citizenship, travel, debt, defence, the economy, and so much more. Let's take the economy, for example. According to a paper from the London School of Economics, about 60% of Scottish exports go to the rest of the UK. If Scotland became independent, then they could strike some sort of deal with the rest of the UK that allows for this trade to continue flowing. However, if they want to leave the UK with the express purpose of rejoining the EU, then a border between Scotland and England would likely need to be erected to ensure that the integrity of the single market and customs union are maintained. While some might argue that all of this is worth it, as the benefits of EU trade would outweigh the drawbacks of creating a taller, more effective Hadrian's Wall, the LSE paper refutes this. They claim that trade-related costs are the same regardless of whether Scotland joins the EU. To oversimplify the paper's findings, this is because Scotland does 4 times more trade with the UK than with the EU. Therefore, rejoining the EU wouldn't do that much to fix their trade situation. If they leave the UK, then trade will drop as friction increases with the rest of the Union. If they then rejoin the EU, then trade would increase with Europe, but due to the value of UK trade and the need for a hard border, the benefits would likely be offset. This trade-related cost of independence is predicted to be between 6.5 and 8.7% of income per capita, regardless of whether they rejoin the EU or not. Now, this is all according to one paper from the London School of Economics. It is possible that Scotland could come to some sort of arrangement with the EU that allows trade to continue with the rest of the UK easily. However, the initial data suggests, economically at least, rejoining the EU might not cover the pain of exiting the UK. However, there are some genuine political arguments to make here. It makes sense that even if Scotland might be economically worse off after exiting, that might be a price worth paying for sovereignty and self-determination. I mean, the English can't exactly judge this logic, considering it's one of the primary pro-Brexit arguments used back in 2016.
Yeah, and I think it was stupid then as well, actually. Like, the idea that, like, England doesn't have sovereignty is really fucking stupid. We've always had sovereignty to some degree. Maybe not like fucking, just do whatever we want and get away with it, right? But, like, the idea that England wasn't a sovereign nation that makes their own laws, it was ridiculous. Like, the main part of the EU is obviously being part of the customs union, right? And, like, the, like EU product standards laws and labor laws and stuff like that, right? Which weren't bad things. These were good things. And the same with Scotland in this sense. I mean, Scotland is less sovereign than England, just for the sheer fact the English government, the English Parliament makes a lot of rules for Scotland. But like this idea that like sovereignty is utterly necessary to running their country, I don't think is really that. I think it's really that true, right? It's not like Scotland is like a hellhole, right? It's not like Scotland doesn't have like a good position in the world. So I can't really get behind this argument. I didn't in 2016, and I don't think I am now.
With Scotland being forced out of the EU largely against their will, and governments in Westminster never really reflecting Scotland's will, it's understandable why some people want to depart the United Kingdom and rejoin their European friends once again.
I think this is one of the benefits of having like a mild political climate in the UK, right? So like the difference between say like Biden and Trump is night and day. Absolutely night and day. It's ridiculous how different these two governances are. But in England, the difference between like Labour and Conservative, although still vast, is not to the same degree in its magnitude of application. Right? It's not like you lose healthcare under one and you gain it under the other. It's not like your school shuts down under one and reopens under the other. It's mainly in England about how much funding it gets and from who, where that funding comes from. So it's one of the benefits of having this mild political climate, right? That we don't really have to worry about like this government's in, that's the end of the nation. Because in some places it is the end of the nation, or the downfall of it. Whereas in others, it might be like worse off for the nation, but it's not exactly like that's it, we're all done. And the same applies to Scotland here, right? Just because the Tories don't perfectly reflect Scottish values doesn't really mean that they aren't taken care of. And again, for those who are like pro EU, they would be making the same arguments for Scotland leaving the UK as England did for leaving the Union, right? So if you're pro staying in unions, why would you want to leave the UK? It makes no sense.
Nonetheless, all of this assumes that the EU would actually accept Scotland. Although,
they
as we said
would.
earlier, Scotland would likely meet all of the basic criteria with ease, this doesn't necessarily mean they'll be fully accepted. One possibility is that Spain could use its veto, fearing that if Scotland was accepted, then Catalonia could be encouraged to follow in its footsteps. Scotland then would have to tread very carefully to convince Spain that its accession from the UK was completely legal, and Westminster saw it as much. Scotland would very likely be let back in the Union, but it's still a concern for some.
Well, that's an interesting bit of geopol, actually. That's a very interesting bit of geopolitics, that the Catalonia independence movement would spark off if Scotland left the UK. Well, it's very interesting, actually. Spain might veto that. I mean, I know in Spain, right, the reason they don't want to allow Catalonia to leave Spain is because Catalonia basically is their entire economy, and the Spanish economy is not very good. It's not been very good for a long time now, and it's being like heavily supported by the EU. And if Catalonia becomes like its own separate market, that'd be really bad for the rest of Spain. So that's very interesting how Spain might veto that. But the case is like fundamentally different with Scotland, because Scotland is not the main source of economy in that union, in the union that it's leaving, whereas Catalonia is. So I guess the argument there would be the harm done by leaving that union. If Catalonia leaves Spain, that would be a big blow to the rest of Spain. Whereas if Scotland leaves the UK, it would be bad for the UK, obviously, but it wouldn't destroy the country.
Some Scots then are certainly excited
What the fuck is it?
the prospects of independence and rejoining the EU, but there's certainly not a clear.
What the fuck is my...
Britain has already tossed itself into Brexit-based uncertainty, so some would argue that Scotland shouldn't take the same risk again in order to rejoin. Whether the SNP will thrive in the 2021 election, if another referendum would be permitted, and if the Scots even want to rejoin Europe, well, those are all questions we don't have answers for yet, but there's certainly a growing call to discuss them. What do you think though? Should and will Scotland choose independence in the decades ahead? Is leaving the UK in pursuit of Europe?
God, I don't think Scotland should pursue independence. I think the UK should rejoin the EU. I think everybody in the UK wants to rejoin the EU, or like, would be for it. Let's have a look. Post referendum. Post-referendum polling. That's what I want. Opinion polling for United Kingdom, European... what the UK thinks. There we go. If there was a referendum on Britain's membership of the EU, how would you vote? And this is from 2020, so this is pretty recent. Come on, internet. I think this site is slow. I don't think it's the internet. On Britain's membership of the European Union, how would you vote? Well, the fuck does this grass in? To leave the EU, to remain a member of the EU, would not vote, don't know. Yeah, so we would stay in the EU by a large margin, should that vote be held today. It was 52 to 48 last time, and now it's 47 to 38. A 9-point difference compared to a 4-point difference. Twice as many people would vote to stay than leave now. Sorry, the difference would be twice as many people. More than twice as many. Yeah, that's not surprising. That is not surprising at all. Let's have a look. Brexit opinion poll 2021. In hindsight, do you think Britain was right or wrong to vote to leave the European Union? Go away. Right to leave, wrong to leave. When was this? Back in... I mean, this is 2020 again. I mean, apparently some people are sticking to their guns, but less so. It's going down as we see what the trade deal is looking like. This is around the time when they were saying, oh, we're going to get such a good trade deal. Oh my god, the trade deal is going to be great. And this is the time we're actually seeing what the trade deal is going to look like. And people are losing faith. Let's have a look. Brexit polls since the referendum. There you go. Even after the 2019 general election, Brexit is absolutely not the will of the electorate, the citizens of the residents of the UK. Remain public vote majority of 5%. There we go, look at that. Total voting for public vote remained 54 compared to voting to leave 43. Almost an 11% majority to stay in the... that's a huge majority right there. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty sad. It is pretty fucking sad.
Worthwhile strategy. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
Let's see what the comments say. I always like to read the comments. How do you advertise your sofa? There's a 4-year-old meme. Scotland stayed in the UK because it didn't want to leave the EU. Yeah. They missed out.
To ensure that the
No, these places not part of the EU. That they leave these out. Yeah, weird. Imagine bringing a girl home and the first thing she sees is the TLDR news couch. I'm gonna buy that sofa. It looks like a nice sofa, actually. This guy doesn't have a Scottish accent. They would just say about how good a job they do explaining. Yeah. TLDR is good. I would buy your stuff, but I don't want to pay import taxes. That's funny. That's funny. Mainly Moreland Forest with about 10 crossing points in total. Yeah, I don't think enforcing the border would be that difficult. I mean, I don't think Scotland or England would want a strict border in that case anyway. Like a fucking big-ass wall. Maybe they're not... Oh, they are using the euro? I don't know. It's fucking weird how they... I love to buy the office fridge, but in the Caribbean. Yeah, TLDR is really good. Super non-partisan. I really like TLDR. All right. Anyway, let's watch Russell Brand talk about vaccine passports.
COVID passports are being discussed. In the US, big tech companies are being granted the right to develop databases, and here in the UK where I am, COVID passports are being discussed as a way of demonstrating whether or not you've had a COVID vaccine. Is it right that big tech companies and the state are given the power to determine whether or not you can enjoy everyday freedoms? Are we moving towards ID cards by stealth and further empowering massive centralised authorities that we have good reason to distrust?
As more and more Americans are getting inoculated against COVID-19, the idea of so-called vaccine passports has emerged as a point of contention. Vaccine passports would be a form of ID to gain entry to certain businesses or cultural events that require patrons to be vaccinated.
There's a slight...
I will say vaccine passports already exist. Just not in the same sense as her. Yeah, you can. Vaccine passports already exist. I have one. Yeah, to go to a lot of countries, you need a vaccine passport. But that is like to enter a country. They become kind of obsolete after that. And what they're talking about here is like entering, say, like a shop or a stadium or something like that, which is significantly different, but nothing nothing new.
Distinction in the way this
it's just an extension of already existing powers
being rolled out in the US versus the UK. Because we have the infrastructure in the UK, i.e. a National Health Service, this is something that can be mandated at a state level. In the US, which is a more corporatized country, you can see that this power and authority has been granted to big corporations. In both cases, it's under the auspices of a return to normal life.
With no national standard, states, companies, and healthcare providers are now coming up with their own options, while overseas, many European countries and global airlines are pushing their own vaccine passports, hoping to jumpstart tourism.
That's an interesting way of bypassing it being a state decision, isn't it? Like, if an airline company says, we're not willing to let you on our planes unless you can prove that you've been vaccinated. The position we find ourselves in is, if you want to enjoy or participate in ordinary life, you're going to have to take new measures.
And Israel already using...
I mean, that's true, but I don't think this is as scary as he's making it out to be. So, like, yes, in order to partake in life, you're going to have to take new measures, but I think that's always been the case, right? Just from like, when we've been like savages with no clothes to now, yeah, you have to wear clothes when you go into like a store. Or like, for example, saying you have to wear shoes when you go into a shop that's on a beachfront, right? Well, you have to take new measures. Well, Coleman, nice to see you. Thanks for being here. They say you have to take like new measures to exist. And I think this is just like the progression of humanity, right? As humanity gets more complex, there are more rules you have to follow in order to peacefully exist within it. So, although it sounds very scary, like, oh, you must adopt new practices to do everyday things, I think this is just the case. So, like, even with the example for the internet, right? Oh, well, you know, nowadays you have to worry about cybersecurity, who you're sharing your data with, blah, blah, blah. And this was never the case beforehand. And you're adopting new measures to function normally, right? Because the normal is now integrated with the internet. So I'm not really too scared of this. It's not something that scares me. Wow, nice to see you as well.
Vaccine passes, giving those vaccinated access to hotels, gyms, music venues, and even cruises. Royal Caribbean restarting vaccine-only cruises from Israel.
Thanks for following, Colin.
I suppose one of the risks is that it creates a two-tier society, that people that have been vaccinated and can provide proof of it will have access to all manner of utilities that will be denied to people that either don't want to have a vaccine, can't afford a vaccine.
I think the vaccines in England, at least, are going to be free, and that's what he's pertaining to. I don't think anybody in England is going to be denied a vaccine on a financial basis. They will be free on the NHS. And secondly, this is already the case with like everything in our society, right? That people who who have access to greater things find it easier to exist, find it easier to do things, right? I mean, the main determinant of this is money, obviously, right? If you have money, you can get away with all this shit. The Zeron, nice to see you. So I'm not really, again, I'm not really scared by this. This is just a function of society. Those with more find it easier to operate within society. Those with less find it much harder. And this has always been the way. And if you want to change that, well, you need to change like broader distributive policies. Having a vaccine that is completely necessary to the survival of the majority of humans is nothing new. Fuck's sake. Let's just oh, am I not signed into the chat on this? Yeah, Wowie, can you ban that bot, please, if you're still here? I can't fucking ban the bot because oh, I think I got it. Yeah, if you want to discuss this topic on VC, come in, sure, for sure. So I'm not, but like, I feel like this is dressed up to be very scary when it's not actually that scary. This seems to me to be like the natural progression of humanity. Humanity gets more complex, things become harder to access, and more than anything, right? This seems to me a highlighter. COVID has been a highlight of the inequalities that we experience, right? I think Russell Brand is pointing out these inequalities, and they sound very bad, but the solution to these inequalities is to address the distribution that is causing this inequality, and not to stop people getting a vaccine, which is completely necessary, and making sure that they have said vaccine. Like, structures of power are not as scary as they should be. This is Katie Surge. Let's have a look. Let's get Zeron on here. Yo, Zeron, what's up? Hello.
Hello there.
How's it going, dude? What's your take on the vaccine passports, then?
Sorry, what?
What's your take on the vaccine passports?
Well, I'd have to actually give a bit of context before I make a take, because, well, I like to do that. That way I don't come off as completely uninformed and ignorant, because, well, people do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm in Canada firstly, so, like, the vaccine, the nature of what's going on is a bit different in Canada because, well, firstly, we have consistently done okay rather than having done horrible and started doing well.
Yeah.
Like Canada's leadership has consistently been Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau's leadership on the vaccine has consistently really been meh, but not as bad as Trump, not as good as Biden, you know?
Yeah.
So while you guys are sort of recovering and getting better, we are actually kind of going around the natural curve of COVID having a third wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you guys are suddenly getting better protection, so it makes it seem like things are getting better, when in reality they are technically getting better if we're going to use better as just an improvement. But they're not. But they're still bad. Anyway, for us, it's actually going worse because we haven't really I live in Quebec, and in Quebec we have shitty leadership for COVID, which I think the current premier of Quebec, that's basically our equivalent of a governor.
Yeah,
is probably gonna have to resign or leave office when the voting happens, just because as an example, I'm sort of talking about COVID, but I'll get to vaccines in just a second. Several families, at least like my mother, I'm just gonna outright say which family member. My mother works at a CHSLD, which is basically a long-term care home, residential home, whatever you want to call it, a public one, with the government. And well, she caught COVID a couple of months ago, and the reason why is because they only gave us procedure masks. You know, the ones that people are wearing regularly now.
Yeah.
The blue ones. They were only given that, not in N95s, despite the fact that scientists and stuff were just saying you need that. And then she caught it, and a bunch of other people caught it, and suddenly they didn't have enough people to help the old people. Firstly, in Canada, even public CHSLDs, like in Canada, there was especially in Quebec area, there was a lot of anger because especially private ones, but also public ones were mistreating residents. And it's kind of gotten worse now.
Nursing homes just globally got hit worse than anywhere. We had this problem in England as well, and who was it in America who it was what's his name, the mayor of New York, Cuomo let a bunch of old people in nursing homes die as well.
Yeah. I understand that idea. I do. Firstly, at the nursing homes, my mom has been trying to save their lives. She's not. She has no some medical stuff, but she's firstly not allowed to help that. And also, these are people who are already dying. Like these are people
they're
who
old as fuck. Yeah.
Yeah. So I understand the idea of letting them die, but I think I'm not saying that's a good thing, not whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I think. I don't advocate, I'm not that much of a utilitarian. I do advocate some utilitarian ideas, but with consequential thought within them, meaning I understand that, I understand the mathematical equations that you can use to just try and make an argument that some lives are more valuable than others and all that, but I also think we should look at the long-term consequences of making those assumptions.
Yeah, real utility.
Yeah, it's not simple utility, it's also, the long-term consequences of a value judgments we make about human lives will have long-term consequences.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that applies to what I'm talking about here, because now they're giving people N95s at CHSLDs, but a lot of people already got COVID, and apparently there are people wanting to make a class action about that, but they can't because, well, I don't remember exactly what's stopping them, but there was something stopping them.
Uh-huh.
And my mom's gotten a second vaccine already. I don't have a vaccine, and the thing is, I'm probably for the recent one, the newer COVID, I'm pretty high risk for it actually. I am like just around an very early adulthood. I'm not going to give my exact age. I don't want to dox myself at all.
Yep, fair enough.
Yeah. But like I'm around the age where for this I'm at moderate risk, but I also have diabetes, thyroid issues, and I have lung scarring from acute like several years of pneumonia when I was a very young kid.
Yeah.
So like all these things combined to mean that this new version of COVID is going to be not fun if I get it, but I still didn't get a vaccine, and I think that's okay. Here's the thing. I think that the main people that need to get vaccines, I think that we should wait until almost all healthcare workers were vaccinated. We should have waited until almost all of them were vaccinated before we gave them to anyone else.
I think that's genuinely what they're doing though. Like the priority for like who gets the vaccines are like healthcare workers and like other people needed to like run society, right?
Well, I'm not saying that's not what's happening. I'm saying that like people are mad about that.
Oh, I mean, yeah, fuck them. Like that's what should be happening.
Yeah. Like what kind of outrage is there? Because I'm not very educated on this topic as much as like I'm educated on specific aspects of it, like my understanding of like value theory and such when it comes to like medical professionals and all. But like, what is the kind of outrage that's going on here that people that like brought you to talk about this?
I mean, it's just something to cover. I just watched this video yesterday. I was like, this is an interesting thing because I mean, like I said, I don't know if you're here at the beginning of the video. Like, I have a vaccine passport, right? Like when I went to Colombia, you have to prove that you have like certain vaccines just to get into the country, just to go to certain areas of the country. And like generally, like I think authoritarian is a bit of a buzzword, and I think people are very scared of like, oh, authority, oh, the government. But like my general take on this is not that like authority itself is scary. I think authority itself is like very useful. Like I think COVID would have actually gone a lot worse if we didn't have any sort of authority or centralized power. The issue to me is not with authority, but with transparency. And I think a lot of people nowadays, especially in like this data age, are very concerned about like the privacy of their data and like who's got their data, who knows who they are, where they are, blah blah blah. And they're very scared of all these things. And I don't think there's as much to be scared about as most people think. Like when people have your data, it's not like they have like a picture of your face and everything that you've done and everything you like, right? You're just like a number on a screen, and then a computer like sends you stuff based on those numbers. And it's that is not like a bad thing. The bad thing is not knowing that that's happening or not understanding how that's happening and being able to critique the system effectively rather than it actually happening itself.
I think the issue with how people treat like transparency and like data and like targeted ads is that they don't realize that this isn't a state problem. This is not a issue of authority. This is an issue of the power people have over you. This is an issue of economics. Like again, also cancel culture, as people call it, is an economic issue, not a social one in my mind. That essentially, like for example, like Disney getting rid of people who are making racist comments, regardless of whether it's justified. Their reason is not that they're not racist.
Yeah, it's for money. Yeah.
Walt Disney had a lot of anti-Semitic tendencies. The reason is profit, and I think if you want to get rid of things like cancel culture and lots of usage of data, like I know a good bit about internet culture because it's kind of what I was born into and what I
just
like to focus on. From
culture nowadays. It's not even internet culture. It's just culture nowadays. Yeah.
Exactly. But, from like what I've learned, and I'm not an expert whatsoever. I don't have a degree in it. I'm in college, but not for that. But what I do know from what I've learned, personally, is that the issue is never like on the right wing side. Usually, the way that they do things is they find a real issue, and then they attribute a false cause to it, a scapegoat, more or less. And I think that's why they're having a hard time solving the issues because when you have a false cause and you try and attack the false cause, you're not actually going to deal with the real cause. Like I think that's pretty common sense. Like if you think someone murdered your friend but they weren't the one who murdered your friend, killing them will not prevent murders.
I think this is similar to what I said earlier about like this like sorry, hold on. I'm a bit word soup at the moment.
No problem.
What did I say? I had a take earlier about this that was akin to this, right? You just said like it's about like falsely attributing blame to one thing rather than the other thing, right? Oh yeah, I remember what I was going to say now. So this is what I said, right? Like the issue is not with like the collection of this data; it's with the system itself just being bad, right? The allocation of resources being bad. Russell Brand said something earlier, like like, oh, well, this may harm minorities more. This may harm, poor people more. This may harm, X, Y, and Z more. But like, this is just the case with everything in our society, right? When a new law comes in, regardless of that law, it almost always harms poor people more. It always almost harms minorities more. This is just how the system works, right?
Yeah,
so saying that like a vaccine passport would disproportionately harm minorities, this is true of everything, and it's just a problem with the system itself and not any new law that can be implemented in said system.
Well, I think there are two sets that need to be addressed at the same time. Firstly, yeah, you're completely right. If we attribute a false cause to it, then we try and make it a single issue thing, but in reality, like, it's a separate cause. Like you said, well, I'm just repeating what you said now in more confusing terms. Sorry.
Yeah.
But the other side of this is that, nonetheless, if we want to deal, we have to choose. Do we want to deal with systemic racism first, or do we want to deal with this issue first? Like one thing I talk about is like traffic like speeding accidents. Car accidents are a major cause of death. No one talks about it. No one talks about that as a political issue. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it should be, at least. I believe that we need more high-speed cameras and that we need less cops on the road, and that we need people to know that if they are speeding, they will be caught, and that it won't be. And the reason I want it to be computers doing that is not because I want a fucking surveillance state. I do not like surveillance, especially I'm not a fan of that. I'm not some sort of tanky. Yeah. I'm not for that.
Yeah. Nobody wants actual 1984. Yeah.
Yeah. In many ways, I would consider myself more of a libertarian realist, like left libertarian, of course, but like sort of a realist in the sense that there are aspects of liberty that are given up for good reason, and there are aspects that are given up for no good reason.
Yeah, no, I agree, right? Like, that's the purpose of like a state, right? I'm not. A lot of people on the left are like full-on communists, and they want the evolution of the state. Like, I like the concept of a state. I think the concept of a state is a good thing. I think centralized authority and like centralized power is a good thing with like a lot of utility to it. I think we should be collectivizing on grand scales, like as much as we can, because with that consolidation of power, we can get things done more effectively. But obviously that comes with this very scary precedent of being like, well, now you've got this like big faceless globalist mass that can just do anything that it wants because it is the ultimate power.
I think you're giving the state too much credit as a government, because I think that generally, like, I'm not against you on that. I think I agree for the most part, but actually, I'll just make the statement, then I'll head back to like surveillance, what I was talking about. But
yeah.
Specifically when it comes to states and stuff, I believe that the power of the government / state, whatever you want to call it, must be equal to or less than the power of the democracy. So if the democracy is not functioning properly and you've got a really powerful state, then you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that a libertarian government shouldn't have democracy. It doesn't really work when you put it into that, so it's not a real good equation. But I think a strong state needs, and I believe there are very few non-strong states. A strong state needs a strong democracy. I mean, it must be stronger or equal to...
Like I said, these structures of power, I'm fine with large structures of power as long as they're transparent, right? That's like the determining factor as to like what makes it democratic, right? That people know what's going on, people are aware of what they're voting for, and like that power can be critiqued. Hey, we got someone in YouTube chat. Nice to see you. I think you're my first message in YouTube chat. That isn't just me testing out the chat. Damn, that's crazy.
Okay.
Thanks for the follow, yeah. Sorry, carry on, yeah.
No problem. Just for anyone who's new, I'm Zeron Ali, and I'm not a streamer, I'm just talking to this dude.
Yeah.
I'm sort of about, like, several things, but mostly relating to, like, I guess, like, the state and surveillance in relation to traffic, and also vaccines. Sort of, we're kind of going on, like...
Currently just, like, a broad authority and, like, how authority functions, I guess.
And I think there are a lot of things you can get out of this topic, but specifically the one that I really think that needs to be brought up way more, and I think I might be the only person on Twitch that ever talks about this, and I don't even stream about it, I just talk about it with people. I like talking about traffic and how, firstly, there are a lot of traffic accidents, and it's one of the main causes of death in most countries, and I don't like that. Like, not the main cause, but it's one of the most avoidable major causes. And also, whenever cops are on the road and pulling someone over for any reason whatsoever, they generally target black people. They generally target minorities.
Yeah.
And I think
cameras can't do that.
It's kind of like someone who's like a libertarian, right, type, like some sort of like laissez-faire libertarian might just call him out as literally 1984 here. But I think we need, like, again, we need high-speed cameras on the roads that automatically give tickets. And I think, firstly, I also think that tickets should be proportional to your wealth, not exact amounts, because I think that someone who's poor should be fined less than someone who's rich.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with that. Yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I think it needs to be like maybe it could be something along the lines of 1% of your monthly income or something like that.
Just to bring it back to the vaccine passports quickly. So, I did a stream quite a while ago now about like different types of policing, right? And it seems like the most commonly used type of policing, or the kind of policing we're moving towards, a lot of like lefties will say community policing is what we need to do. I completely disagree with this take. And it seems to be where we're going with policing, which I much more agree with, is intelligence-led policing. So like instead of like a surveillance state, like you might say, you do appear as like data, right? But how that data appears is not like your name, your face, where you live, how you operate, and the access to that data is also restricted, and the public understand how this procedure works, or at least can access how this procedure works. And I think very much the same could be applied to vaccine passports, right? So it's not necessarily like you have a passport with a, yes, I have COVID, here's my name, here's my face, here's my address, you have to show this to everybody you see. But more like, you are a number in a database, and that number at some point along the chain, independent of any human interaction, verifies that yes, you don't have COVID and you have been vaccinated for it. And this could be like a temporary measure, and even if this is a permanent measure, there's not really a lot of risk to it because it's just a computer that doesn't have any human interaction, that essentially just checks a box based on like a QR code or something like that, and nobody ever has to be involved with this. And I think that solution seems like quite amicable to me. Like in much the same way that you said about like speed cameras, like taking the human element out of this removes the like the danger for corruption.
I think you're right, but there's also a flaw in that. I think the flaw is that humans design computers, and humans have biases. So the way that a computer is designed, while it may function independently from humans for the most part, the actual design and creation of it will be biased. For example, like where we place, like if we have police drones, sure, they might not attack a black person more than a white person, but they will be probably distributed more in black zone, in like the zones where African Americans are way more common. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I understand that. Yeah, that is true. Yeah,
it's like the actual placement. Like I don't know if it's not geopolitics, but it's like the actual placement of these things, and like aspects of human. You cannot remove the human from this stuff. It's very difficult to do so without. And I'm not anti-AI. I don't think AI is going to go self-aware. I think that's literally impossible for an AI to become actually self-aware, can mimic it. And I think the reason we think of it that way is because we anthropomorphize AI all the time too much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like
I guess, but like the fundamental difference between here, like you said with like speeding cameras, and my application to this with vaccine passports, is these would essentially be applied everywhere where you have like large gatherings of people. So like they wouldn't be in like parks and stuff because they're outside, and we obviously know the risk for COVID outside is much lower. They would be in like supermarkets though, and they would be in, say, I don't know, stadiums, things like that, right? And again, this could be, I don't know if you've seen this, the like Amazon stores. So you have like an app on your phone, right? And you walk through like a gate, and when you walk through that gate, it just charges your account based on like your phone, right? As long as your phone's connected to the Wi-Fi or whatever, connected to that, then it charges you. And if it can't make that purchase, then it like scans you, and there's like a security guard who picks you up. I think the same could be applied for a vaccine passport, right? You just have the app on your phone. You appear as a piece of data. This piece of data doesn't really ever see the light of human eyes. Maybe you do a spot check every now and again just to make sure that it was working, but it's not something that is constantly monitored information. And you walk through the little gate, the gate checks you've got a passport, and then you go in. If it flags you as wrong or like no, then a security guard stops you and checks you out. And like I don't know, I don't see that much of a problem with that. I think that could work.
I think it's better than what we have. I think the main issue with these kind of solutions, even the one that I mentioned, I'm not saying my solutions are perfect. Even my solution, and the one you mentioned for vaccine passports, which I agree with for the most part, the issue is they address a symptom and not a cause. Because it's like a painkiller. You take a painkiller and your symptoms go away for a few hours. You're not actually addressing the cause. So like, I'm not saying that we can't address the cause. That's the thing. That's the problem with wanting to with a cause and an effect. Like we have to view things from that lens. That like, if the reason we want the solution that you're talking about, like both of these solutions for speed cameras and for that, is to fix an issue without allowing the racism to go in, then the cause of the issue that we're trying to deal with, not the issue of vaccines, and not the issue, like, just let me finish, it'll take a few seconds. Not just the vaccines and not just the speeding, but like the issue of the racism within this is we cannot deal with that as quickly as we can deal with these issues, and people need the vaccine passports now, and people need to stop dying on the roads now.
Then
because no one is talking about that.
Then I think the most prescient issue here is assuring that this system that is necessary to put in place now, because I think we both agree that this is like a necessary thing to do now. I think the most prescient issue becomes, how do we make sure that this system that is implemented does not then get used to further a system that is inherently racist? And like I said, I think taking the human aspect out of this, with vaccine passports especially, makes this easier. But then again,
I think you're using the wrong word. You cannot take the human aspect. That security card could be racist, or more likely to not will be. Or like, it just means you cannot take the human element out. We need to remove it as much as possible. We cannot do so fully. That's not going to be very easy.
Yeah.
It'll be next to impossible to remove the human element entirely.
But do you know what? I'll even bite the bullet and say perhaps this is a good thing, because although it will affect the fact that it affects minorities more is obviously bad, right? But the fact that this is so overtly noticeable, I think, could probably be argued as a good thing. So the argument has often been made with COVID that COVID, more than anything, highlighted the inadequacies of the systems that we believe in, right? So, like, capitalism really got shit on in COVID, okay? COVID versus capitalism, COVID won. Capitalism looked like shit. And I think having this kind of system and this being so overt nowadays, and only getting more overt, how inequalities are like directly harmful and they directly impact people. And with
there's a quote I like to use for this. I don't know who I heard the quote from, but there's a quote. The coronavirus does not discriminate. Capitalism does.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Like, coronavirus isn't the one discriminating against black people. The coronavirus isn't just going into a black community and saying, "I don't like this group of people. I'm going to kill them more."
Yeah.
It's not doing that. And even the only real way you could address that is with a race realist position, like someone trying to say that black people are more likely to die biologically. That's not true. That's quite simply not true.
Yeah.
The main and most noticeable, and the one that's caused all the issues in terms of racial biases, is skin color, and that only affects certain skin conditions in terms of causes. And that's really the most scientific you can get with race realism. Yes, certain conditions like skin cancer specifically, can affect certain races more. That's it.
Yeah.
There's no like, this doesn't fucking apply to COVID. I've had a lot of people tell me that it does.
Wow.
Like, they've used that to justify and say it's not capitalism, it's COVID, which is attacking black people more. And then they use that to justify saying
it is the systemic inequalities that is highlighting. And this is what I say, like, I think, like I said, vaccine passports, I don't think I'm for them, but should they be like necessary? I think they're a necessary evil. And I think it's important to recognize that they are not like a good thing, but a necessary thing. It should they be necessary. And the fact this may affect like minorities more, poor people more, is like we both agree, is symptomatic of the system. And having that may not necessarily be a bad thing in a utility sense, because this does make us we have to look it in the face, right? If you can't afford a mobile phone, and as such, it becomes more difficult for you to like access a shop and like go and buy food because you can't like be checked for your vaccine passport or whatever. That becomes quite overt, doesn't it? People recognize that, like.
I think you're right on that. No, actually, I strongly disagree on one thing you're saying here. Is it's not by utility. It's not good that it's visible. That's more of a consequence, not a utility. Like, okay. Personally, even though it's more obvious even though it's more obvious towards the people being hurt, people will still be ignorant. Like, I don't think severity, severity makes things more visible, yes, but and that's true, but that does not mean, like, if we apply this to, say, like, racists, Tucker Carlson and, like, in a very obvious white supremacist, maybe it's like, would you rather have the obvious white supremacist on air? People will still, like, it's not just because it's more visible does not mean it's actually going to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And I don't think people actually. I think the fact that it's more visible, it doesn't actually do that much. It doesn't do much good for it to be obvious. Because people are very good at misleading themselves. Cognitive biases are powerful. I have them too.
Yeah.
I have them in the opposite direction of most right wingers, and there's an idea that I state that I think is very good for people who want to understand the world, is that people need to understand that unless, like, imagine that every single question in the world only had a yes or no answer, and there was no in between. So if I said, like, if I, for example, said blue is the best color, imagine that that's an objective statement, and it's either false or true. If it was a 50% chance somehow, even like as though every other color combined had the same chance, then 50% of the time I'd be wrong with anything I guessed, with anything I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at the real world and say, perhaps even no matter how educated we get, we have the odds of us being correct being very low, even though maybe we are more educated, even though maybe it's not random chance, because like our understanding of, say, how computers work mean that a question about computer and AI life is more accurate than it would be to a caveman. But nonetheless, I believe that it's more than likely that everyone in the world is likely wrong about the majority of the things they believe, objectively speaking.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's simply a matter of probability, and it's sort of like existential probability that. And I think just thinking about that fact and understanding that we are probably wrong about most of the things we believe, regardless of how hard we try, the best thing that we can do about that is use that to fuel ourselves. And this kind of is kind of like off topic, but I think it relates in the way that if people want to have a position like about like race and race realism or like equality and any aspect of anything, we cannot simply we cannot assume that we're correct. We cannot turn the subjective opinions into objective fact. And that's what the world's kind of doing right now. We have like the whole fake news phenomenon. We have people believing that like our truth, and the idea that like that nothing's really true, that we can just believe what we want, which is a very liberal type idea.
Yeah.
I think that is part of what's like, I think that people take comfort in that, in like the idea of like alternative facts, basically. And that concerns me quite a bit. I don't know why. I don't even think that's really relevant to what we're talking about. I'm trying to make it relevant.
No, I get what you're getting at. You're just like delving deep into the psychology of the individuals who sort of act like this and like why they justify it. And I do agree. I don't think you're wrong in like a broader sense. But I still think that utility is probably the right thing to describe it. In the sense that when something becomes obvious. Right, like so. Firstly, in order to address a problem, you must recognize the problem, right? And a lot of the time, people won't recognize a problem because it is not obvious, right? So, like for example, with like systemic inequalities, a lot of people.
I think I disagree with you exactly on that.
Really, you think people? So I agree that like people People will.
People being stupid.
Yeah, no. So people will like see the problem and they're like, well, they won't see it as a problem. That's the point, right? But when you make that problem like worse, when you magnify that issue, people go, okay, maybe this is a problem, and I think that then leads people to like think about it and like point fingers.
Really like accelerationism. That's kind of like that's literally what cultural accelerationism is making things worse for minorities to let people recognize that there's an issue. And like I do not allow that as like a concept in my head. Is the idea. I don't think that making something worse makes it better. I don't think that making.
But like I said, like the worse in this scenario is a result of something that perhaps is necessary. So it's not like we're actively making things worse to make a point. We're making things worse with the utility of stopping people getting COVID, and then that worseness also provides this sort of secondary utility of overtly making the problem there. And people having to sort of face up to that issue.
Well, it's sort of the ends justifying the means, which I think only really I don't think that applies in this case as being really valid because, well, how do I say this? When saying like you could definitely there, I think if we have two extremes of the spectrum here, we start with like just having this like be like a little 1D line. On the far left, but we have a problem that's so insignificant and unnoticeable, and regardless of its actual severity, that people don't think it exists because it's hard to notice. Like, like issues of the English language, people don't really think about it at all, and it's also not as super severe. But I like to focus on it a lot. And on the very, very far other end, we have things like the inherent incompatibility of a hierarchical market, aka capitalism, with a functional democracy. That's something that people are really thinking about, mostly with regards to like the electoral college, and like their issue. But then, yeah, like the more noticeable problem is, the easier it is for someone to dismiss it as absurd.
I think that's true, but I think it's like catalytic in its nature, right? So obviously when a problem becomes more obvious, more people will make excuses for that problem. And we see this all the time with, I don't know, there's too many examples to start giving them. But when the problem becomes more obvious, I think more people recognize that problem and are then likely to be convinced otherwise, right? So
I don't think that's the best way to go about it, though. I think the best way
it's not the best way to go about it. I completely agree. It's not the best way to go about it. There are much better ways to like convince people into better positions, but specifically as a result of potential vaccine passports, that like this may be one positive that we get about it, even if it's not the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I get you. I'm not against you on vaccine passports here.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the proper justification for it.
No, obviously the justification is to like curb the cause of COVID. This is like a secondary, tertiary benefit at best.
Yeah. I don't think it's a benefit. Like, I would suggest you read up on like on accelerationism. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I know accelerationism. Yeah.
I'm not sure. I think that kind of aligns a bit too much with accelerationism for me to see that as like I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong. I can't really say that.
Yeah, you get the point. Yeah.
I'm just wondering. I just don't think that's how in the long term. I don't know if that's going to be a good way for us to view consequences, in terms of creating a problem to fix a problem.
Well, again, like I said, I don't think we're necessarily creating a problem here, right? I think the problem is there, and the solution creates another problem.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I'm sorry. That's what I said. Like, a solution that also causes a problem is not really a solution.
Yeah, but I don't think there is a solution to this that does not cause another problem, right? So, this tends to be the case. Yeah, this tends to be the case. Like with COVID, right? Like, we can either get vaccine passports, and obviously this is gonna hopefully should curb the spread of COVID, right? Because we know where it is, like track and trace, blah 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 blah. Apparently, it's effective as long as it's done right. Again, we could like look into the data on that, but like that seems to be the working theory at the moment. But like, and not doing this obviously like increases the spread of COVID, which comes with its own issues. But the problem created by this is, if we have vaccine passports, we give more power to authorities, and like our personal data is being spread around more. But if we don't, then obviously COVID gets worse, and then this affects minorities more. But this also may highlight the problem, and thus make more people aware and more likely to fix it. So it's like a large chain of events that, I mean, in some cases, like I guess like a question I like to ask in scenarios like this is, what's the alternative?
Yeah.
Right, and the alternative to me seems to be like, again, I'm not even like particularly for COVID passports, but the alternative to me seems to be like, we do nothing about this. It continues to fuck minorities over like anyway. And, it fucks everybody else over as well.
Yeah.
And in my solution, it seems to be like, well, yeah, it fucks minorities over still, but at least we're highlighting the problem so that we can fix that problem, make more people aware of that issue. And we have the benefit of like, potentially curbing COVID. So like, when considering alternative, I think it's not like a desirable outcome, but I think it's a preferable alternative.
Yeah, I hear you. I got kind of bad news though. I have to go like really soon.
Oh, that's okay. You've spiked my viewership. Okay, you're like
really?
You're great content. You're great content. I'll say that much.
I appreciate that. Really.
No, it's true.
I've been on a lot of streams. Like, how many viewers do you have right now?
Well, I was at like 1 when you came in, and now it's 7. So you've 700% increase in viewers. Okay.
Just for everyone in the chat, if you leave the server, I will find who you are, and I will play Minecraft with you and kill you in Minecraft.
Damn.
Okay, actually, never mind. There are actually,
you can't say that anymore, can you?
FBI agents too. Like the FBI agent listening into this is going to get really pissed. Like, he's using the in Minecraft code work. It's a dog whistle.
I know they're onto that now, aren't they? You can't even say that shit anymore. Yeah,
they are onto that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But you got to change it to Terraria, because Terraria isn't very well known.
Oh yeah, Terraria. Kill you in Terraria. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the new one.
Yeah, I don't really advocate for actually like even for like threatening even with like an obvious joking version of it. I mean, like, seriously, do not leave this guy. He's really awesome.
Thank you.
He's gonna still make good contact even without me.
Thank you. I very much appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll see you around.
Thank you, man. Thanks for coming on. We like this, Aaron's cool. Anyway, we'll continue watching the video on Russell Brand. I've watched this video before. I watched it last night, and I think Russell Brand does give like a fairly nuanced take. But I think, like I said with Zero, I think people are like unnecessarily scared of authority or big like structures of authority. What have you two been arguing about fucking in chat? Fucking haha and Wowie have been going at it in chat. Oh, Frutus is here. Nice to see you, Frutus. Yeah, it's not a dog wheel, it's a fig leaf at best. Yeah, everybody knows. Everybody knows. It's just, I don't know, you gotta beat the algorithm, you know? I beat the computer. What the fuck are you two arguing about? Basically, he's just silly. Alright. Anyway, let's continue watching Russell Brand.
Suspicious of vaccines, don't participate in life. You know, there are all sorts of other social issues that come to the forefront, economic issues, race and class issues that are all highlighted by something like a mandated passport. Not to mention the idea that we were assured that there would never be an ID card, and a COVID passport in this country is an ID card by another name. Stephanie Hare in the
that's
Guardian
true, right?
said, for months, ministers have been...
In like most European countries, they have ID cards, right? Frutus, you're here. I hope you're still here, right? Do you have like ID cards in France? Do you have to carry around an ID card with you a bunch of the time? Like I know in Spain they all have an ID card, right? In Colombia, where I was, they have an ID card. Thanks for following Major Plausible. Yeah, there you go. In France they have ID cards. In Spain they have ID cards. In Colombia, I mean, I know that's not in the EU, but you know, it's just another country with ID cards. They're pretty common in most of the world. Yeah, national ID cards. In Colombia they're called célidas. Célida. I don't know, like, is there like, I'm not really for this, I don't think. I think it seems a bit surveillance-y, but it doesn't, does the, is this ever exploited by the government? Is this ever used to like fuck you over? Like, what are the procedures in place to stop this from like being used against you? Because like, it sounds very scary, and I don't think I'm convinced by it, right? I don't like having to have ID on me all the time, but we're debating vaccine passports. I guess you're in favor of every tyrannical measure. Not really. I'm not for vaccine passports. What I will say is I would like to see the data on if they're effective, and then I would like to see the system that they might put out for them, should they be effective. Because there's a debate around if they are even effective, and then there's a debate around what kind of system would be used to implement them. So I'm not really in favor of them at this point. But data pending, my opinion is subject to change. The data on the disease is not even. Oh, come on, let's not do the COVID denial stuff. Come on. What are you guys arguing about? It was a plethora of information. He believes business shouldn't have the right to fire based on prejudices they show at the workplace. Oh yeah, they basically just do this for money, though, right? That seems to be like the be all and end all of the thing, right? Businesses do have the power to fire people based on the profit of their business. There will definitely be vaccine passports for traveling, an extra letter on a passport. I wouldn't be there already are these things, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if COVID is included in this, but there already are these things. Chips and gravy. Nice to see you, by the way. Like I said this earlier, right? I have a vaccine. I personally have a vaccine passport, right? And I've got like 5 or 10 vaccines listed on there. And that was to go to South America. So this is not like a new thing, not at all. The trouble here comes with using them to go to the store, go to a stadium, go to a concert, go, you know, just do regular human being things, go to a sports center, something like that. I'm just saying, and you can't question it is weird, like, so the randos even like it, and I feel like I'm living in absurdist comedy. I mean, I think there's plenty of solid data on COVID, and it's pretty much confirmed by every kind of authority on this. And yeah, I don't really agree with that.
In telling us that there are no plans for vaccine passports while funding 8 pilot schemes to test them. Matt Hancock said, the Health Secretary, "We're not a papers carrying country, yet here we are with the government reviewing plans to become just that."
I don't think this is framed to be very evil, right? But I think, again, this is the purpose of the government, right? This is the purpose of the government, right? To investigate things that may be to the benefit of the people, right? Yeah, no, we're not aspiring to do this, but we'll look into it just in case it is actually something that's really good, and then maybe we'll change our opinions. That is how a government should be. That is the purpose of a government, to investigate things that may be beneficial to its citizens. I could deny gravity exists and jump off a balcony. It would only affect myself, but now people are denying the pandemic is real and are killing other people. It's true, yeah. It's true.
Personal feelings are that the institutions that have the power to carry this out have not behaved in a way that engenders trust up until now. On Under the Skin soon, we have Edward Snowden as a guest who risked his own safety and sanity and liberty to bring to the wider public the way that American government agencies behave in regard to data. We're now on the precipice of granting those very institutions, agencies and companies unprecedented abilities to control our lives and our freedoms. In the end...
Yeah, but that is the purpose of the state, right? To control our lives and our freedoms, right? Unless you believe in like natural rights, which I very much don't. That is the purpose of the state, to grant you rights and to grant you freedoms and to like limit your autonomy, right? In order to create a society which is stable, right? So like limiting people's ability to murder is like a good thing, because then we don't get people murdering each other and getting away with it. And we don't get like 100-year vendettas, like, you know, blood feuds. So this is like a good thing. The state limiting our ability to do that is good. And this, again, it's framed to be very scary. Oh, the state, it limits our freedoms. It does this. Well, yeah, that is its purpose, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. The vaccine is a Trojan horse for more vaccines to save people. Russell, my man. Yeah, this is we're looking at Russell Brand today.
This issue becomes...
Oh, hold on. I missed a long comment. Okay. I think the UK may be the only country outside of China that won't allow that will allow mass gatherings. We might be the only nation that has beaten this vaccine, except certain smaller nations. Yeah, I know Australia is doing well, and so is New Zealand. They did really well just like throughout the entire pandemic. In Australia, they never even had to wear masks, and they had very few cases. The same with New Zealand. But yeah, no, we are recovering from the vaccine at a pretty quick rate, actually. I will say it's going quite well here, and the restrictions being lowered, like they said they would, is I think deserving of a little bit of trust. You know, they said they were going to do something, and they did the thing. I think we should give them a little bit of a credit where credit's due on that basis. It's an RNA. Doing vaccine conspiracy. Okay.
Not about the pandemic, but about trust and who we grant authority to and how they may use that authority.
The Cabinet Office Minister, Michael Gove, says the government is...
I don't think Russell is intentionally doing this, right? But it does come across very like the authority we grant them and how they may use that authority. And like I say, authority is a bit of a buzzword, isn't it? It's a bit of a buzzword. Authority. The authoritarian government. Authority. And authority, like I say, authority is not necessarily a bad thing. Centralized power is not necessarily a bad thing. I promise you, we would have done a lot worse against COVID did we not have a centralized government. Vaccine rollouts would have been way more difficult. Mask mandates would have been way more difficult. Shutting down entire sectors would have been way more difficult. And that was authority. Right, that was the authority that they give, and they had as the state, and that's not a bad thing. We also get vaccinated in schools in the US, at least in my state. I was required to go for going on to middle school and high school. Yeah, that makes sense. And did you die? Did you die when you got the vaccine? Netflix and kill? Did you die? Liberalism is totalitarian. I don't know if it's totalitarian, but like I think liberalism tends towards authoritarianism. I think I'll concede that.
Studying a green...
Only momentarily, but they brought me back as a liberal cyborg pretty quickly. Okay, good. He did die, but like, oh, it's good. It was fine. It's a revival juice, adrenochrome harvested from babies. Yeah.
Our system used in Israel. If the plan does require legislation, the government may try to win over the rebels by promising it'll only be temporary, perhaps for no more than a year.
Firstly, if it does require legislation, surely something this radical does require legislation, and assurances that it might be temporary, for me, don't feel that comforting, because I feel like that when 9/11 happened, for example, the Patriot Act was introduced in America, new government powers were granted. Typically, when governments are granted temporary powers, those powers are seldom repealed. This could be a pivotal moment in history. Often disasters and times of crisis are used to leverage further power for already powerful entities. Read Naomi Klein's shock doctrines. There's a long precedent for this technique. Find a problem, provide a solution to that problem. The solution to that problem impedes freedom of ordinary people.
I think this is true. So he said that typically when governments gain power, they seldom give it up. I think that's true. I think that's a reasonable statement. And we should be cautious of the power we grant government and like the limitations on our freedom, right? But my issue with this kind of thinking and this sort of rhetoric, this kind of message being spread, is it discourages faith in our institutions. And I think this is a vital component to a functioning society, having faith in our institutions, right? When we just completely distrust the government, when we completely distrust science and medicine and our education system and the police, this is actually more harmful for our society than the opposite, which is granting them a little bit more power than we might be comfortable with. Having complete distrust of any institution, I think, is definitely more dangerous than those institutions being a little bit too powerful, right? Even if they are a little bit too powerful and it makes people a little bit uncomfortable, I think better that than we just completely distrust them and they and you know we end up getting fucking like rioting and storming of the Capitol and shit like that. You're a closeted totalitarian? I'm not at all. I just think that people are very scared of authority and authoritarianism. It's a bit of a buzzword, and I think this kind of thinking leads to worse outcomes than the thing that they're actually scared of. The reality of this situation. I think the major issue is that there is balance between how deadly the virus is and how much damages lockdowns cause, or lockdowns, etc., COVID measures cause. There are a lot of issues people don't think about, i.e. supply chain issues. However, the amount of debt caused by just a year of this may collapse the global economy at some point. That probably will lead to more extreme governments like the 1930s. I disagree with you to an extent, Chips and Gravy. So I do think there is a balance between sort of like COVID restrictions and the damage that COVID causes. I think that's fair, but again, I think we're skirting the line here between sort of like liberty and authority. I'm not against authority inherently, and I'm not for liberty inherently. Obviously, these are good concepts. Did my fucking connection on Twitch just drop? What the fuck? Hold on, am I still live on Twitch? What the fuck? Guys, can you hear me? Are we F? Are we fucking F? It says I'm not connected to Twitch anymore. What the fuck? What is this? Alright, I'm still here, but what the fuck? It says I'm not connected to Twitch anymore. If I do die, can someone like give me a little F in the chat? Yeah, it's a black and white fallacy. I think Wowie said that, right? Yeah. It is not like liberty or authority, right? It's this line of creating a system that has the authority to keep us in check and, you know, provide a happy society without having like liberty to the extent where it actually causes more of a problem than it does solve a problem. Yeah, that was weird because it said I wasn't connected to Twitch, but I was connected to YouTube. So I know my internet didn't drop, but I don't know. Probably just a bug in the system. The CCP got to me. Truth might save lives on this case, and you are lying there for views. I'm not lying for views. I despise partisanship, okay? I despise partisanship, right? I only give my 100% honest opinions, regardless of what the viewers think of it. Can't believe everyone is believing in things that are actually happening. Yeah, you're making a Hobbesian argument. Maybe I am. Maybe they're right about that. I don't really know that much about it. I went to uni in the UK. What is going over there with your education? They taught you all better than this. Wait, dogmatism is bad. I'm mind blown. True, Rubicon. You got it. What did I say? UK is falling apart? I don't think so. I think UK is actually like getting much better. In terms of COVID, anyway. In terms of the economy, yes, we are. It's terrible. It's really bad.
And for me, it raises huge questions about the way that we organise power more generally, about how power is centralised. The idea of this becoming potentially a global plan.
No, look at this. This is just like anti-globalism stuff. Right? I'm a globalist, okay? I think globalism is cool. I think we should be collectivizing on as large a scale as possible and become just a one united Earth, right? I think that's what we should be doing. Maybe like a Republic of Earth. I think that would be very cool, right? With individual countries being like states rather than like states in like a republic sense rather than states as in like a nation state. Because that's like when we collectivize resources, we become more powerful, right? As a species. And that's the only way we're ever going to expand past Earth rather than just like simple, like little nations trying to do it. We need the entire planet on the same page. And yeah, that big structural authority seems very scary, but it's not like we can't have checks and balances. It's not like it can't be transparent. It's not like we can't take measures to prevent it from spiraling off into some sort of fucking dystopian nightmare. And the alternative is, well, not very good, in my opinion, right? We just get these like random little fucking offshoots with their own little rules, acting in their own ways, and this incredibly complex web of communications that I think only slows down the efficacy of humanity. Globalism is good. Globalizing too fast is really bad for weaker economies. I agree with this. We should actually be, we should not be extracting value from the global south. We should be investing value in the global south. Globalism is terrible. You're just too short-sighted to see this. I mean, you say this, right? But I think what I actually am is major long-sighted. Okay, you're thinking about like your own lifespan, right? I'm thinking about hundreds of years into the future where we're going to need to be like leaving the planet. Right? And in order to do so, we're going to need to be globalizing all our resources, collectivizing all the resources of the planet to achieve things like this. Right? I think I'm actually very long-sighted, and you are the short-sighted one in this issue. I thought there wouldn't be vaccine passports anymore. Well, they're not planning on rolling any out, but they are investigating them. When your children are living under world tyranny? Well, you're assuming that any kind of globalistic government would inherently be tyrannical. And I don't agree with that. I just don't agree with that premise. I don't think that's right. Investing capital is already a thing. I know, but we like what I said is we extract way more value from the global south than we invest value there, right? We should actively be like developing poorer countries rather than just extracting all their resources and cheap labor. Power corrupts, of course it was. We settled this in the 18th century. Power does corrupt, but that doesn't mean you can't have checks and balances for power, right? Right, like you could make this argument for absolutely any structure of power, any kind of hierarchy, but hierarchies are in fact necessary. And this is agreed upon by like literally every single political scholar ever. Hierarchies are necessary and they do consolidate power, and this power can be dangerous, but we still need checks and balances on these things, which we obviously would have under my system.
that affects our abilities to travel, to interact, to communicate, to enjoy.
It doesn't mean dividing power, right? It just means having a transparent system of power and one that can be modified and one that is democratic and representative. It doesn't necessarily mean having many different bodies doing their own separate thing. Tyranny is harder to maintain the bigger the scale it gets. That's actually a really great point. That's actually a really, really great point. Consider like the Roman Empire or the British Empire. It starts to fall apart on the fringes because you can't enforce it everywhere. It's actually a great point. Federalism is possible with a singular structure, you know, states' rights, all that shit. Yeah, that's what I said, right? That's what I said, like a republic of Earth. And all the countries become like separate states with their own like level of sovereignty, but governed over by a larger federal body. Or in this case, global body. It doesn't matter if it's transparent and you cannot change it. It does, yeah. Of course it matters if it's transparent. If you understand how that system works and where the corruption is or like who's bad, then you can change it. You can be like, that's corruption, that's bad. I can see it because the system is transparent. Stop doing that. And then they have to because it's democratic, right? It reflects the will of the people. Globalism is leading to the rise of the modern Nazi party in China. I think nation sovereignty is inevitable and will always want to be ruled by the people closer to themselves. I think sovereignty and self-determination is underestimated. Like I said, I think you can have this under a republic system, right? So like states' rights, but for nations. So for example, like within unions inside countries, like within the UK, right? The UK is a union. And like Scotland is not technically sovereign, and it often doesn't get like fully represented by the British government. But it's not like Scotland is like a pile of shit being left out to dry. Thanks for following, Bud Bolin. Appreciate that. Thank you. I think I'm more concerned with like the utility of being unionized over the utility of being sovereign. I think being unionized is better than being sovereign. Like, in much the same way, I think this is like a very liberal mindset, right? And I think it has a lot of parallels with like liberal capitalism, right? This like structure of like, yes, I want my own self-determination. I want my own sovereignty. I want to be able to do my own thing, right? I can go and compete in the single market as an individual. Whereas we all know it's actually much better to compete in the market as a collective. And like I said, I think it's a very liberal mindset to be anti-globalist. The Republic of Ireland Empire failed. They tried to control sovereign nations and failed. Pretty simple. Well, as long as if those sovereign nations were compliant, they wanted to be part of it, I'm sure it would have worked. The problem was the system of power wasn't transparent and democratic. If it was, then it probably would have worked. Literally everything in tyranny history failed due to being too big to handle, yeah. You're talking about multipolarity? Perhaps I am. You're talking about the UN, which has failed. I mean, we say this, right? So with like large structures of powers and unions, these things often are like difficult to manage, right? Because you've got a lot of like different interests pushing at each other. But I don't think inherently these systems cannot function. The same with like the EU, right? I think it's a very similar thing. The UN is alive and well as a diplomatic platform. Yeah, it's not beyond critique, but like to say it's failed, I think is a little far. Yeah. But why are you not rooting? Why are you not? Oh, why are you not individuals rooting for tyrannical endless power to consume? Oh, I'm not. I'm not rooting for that. I'm specifically saying I don't want that, but I think we should collectivize on as large a scale as possible. Right? That's different. Globalism calls for the end of nations, aka the end of collectives. No, I don't think so. Like I said, like I'm proposing like a state, like a republic model, right? So it'd still be like borders. It's just those borders would be easier to traverse. Nothing more liberal than globalism. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the way you're arguing for it is the way you're arguing for sovereignty is very liberal. And I think the way I'm arguing for globalism is very communal. Communism, liberalism, fascism are all the same. No, I don't agree with that at all. We have a great system where the nation does not have one seat of power. Each state is separate. Yes, but they're all governed by a federal system. right? Which is exact. If you think that's a great system, maybe we should apply that entire system to the entire world, right? Yeah? I think we're on the same page. I think you get it now. Yes. Why will checks and balances not work across the globe? If they work at the level of the US, why would they not work on a bigger level? There you go. Fratus is on the same wavelength as me. From a tribal perspective, not from an individualist perspective, yeah, I think that's very weird. Tribalism is essentially dead. You know that, right? Like, and you know, tribalism much more revolves around like communal values and like who you consider as part of your tribe. And if you consider the entire world as part of your tribe, then you can, you know, you can have a tribe in that sense, right? Whereas liberalism is much more about individuality and like isolation. So again, I think you're arguing from this from a very liberal perspective. An individual is completely opposed to the interests of the tribe. Not at all. Not at all. Individualists, like, although they very much value self-autonomy, you have to recognize that your self-autonomy is determined by the system in which you live, right? And thus it's in your interest to work with others. So you still do care about the tribe. As much as you are like an independent agent and you have your own desires, you still have to work within a community in order to ascertain those things. Because suddenly we're not dealing with the US history and the Constitution, we're dealing with the UN and its rules. So we could write a world constitution, you know that, right? Imagine that. I bet you'd love that. Constitution for the entire world. I don't think I'd even be against that. No, maybe I would be. I don't really like constitutionalism. Guys, I really want to know if Biden's going to end the trade war and tariffs. I really want a precise answer. I really want to know. I'm sorry, I don't know if I can answer that. I don't know if I can answer that at all. If I were president, I would tariff communist nation. What do you think communism is, Major Plausible? What do you think communism is? I don't think you're applying to real politics. If one nation is better than another, people will want to move to that nation. If that nation cannot control its own borders and laws, it will eventually succumb to the problems of failing nations. By failing nations it cannot control. Right, I understand what you're saying, right? But the solution to this is to make both nations as good as each other, right? So if you have like one shit nation and one good nation, that one good nation should help the shit nation become better, and then people will want to live in both places. Right? And this is what I said about investing in the global south, right? Instead, like, if you don't want, and Biden's actually doing this, funnily enough, because he knows that this is the answer, right? If you don't want like a swath of Mexican immigrants flowing up into the US, which, to be completely honest, I'm not convinced is a problem anyway. Make Mexico better, and they'll want to stay there. So invest in Mexico, and that's what Biden is actually actively doing, investing in like Central America. So, like I said, if you make that place better, then not only does it become like a better trade partner, the people there are happier, more productive, you also fix this issue or perceived issue that you think of like people moving from one area to another. So that seems like an obvious solution to me. Capitalism caused the CCP to rise to global power. Big brain for Toos. A world constitution written by the UN would be about COVID and green energy. It's about, well, that sounds based. I think it sounds based. Global health and green energy? I think it sounds fucking based. I don't know. I don't even like constitutionalism as a doctrine, but I think that sounds fucking based. I think I'd be on board with that, actually. I can't share a government with people who don't share my values and principles. Oh, that's rubbish. That's absolute bullshit, Gobunist. You already do. You already do. There are millions of people who disagree with you in your own country. That's bullshit. You already do. Instead of writing essays, everyone's already read. Why you please go on? Oh my! I turned off the background music. I've just been talking to myself with silence in the background for ages. Biden is investing in the Mexico-US border wall. That is true, actually. Biden is continuing to build the wall because it's already paid for, which is kind of cringe. You should just cancel that. That is very cringe. Biden deserves to be critiqued for that. But Biden is also investing in the Central America, which is good. Which is good. What's wrong with the move? Trying to move towards green energy? Yeah, exactly. Budballing gets it. Sounds fucking based. The entire world focused on green energy and public health. I think that sounds fucking cool. I think we should do that. Yeah, I'd like that. But you can't control other nations. You can't help them solve their issues. Mexico isn't poor because it's poor. It's rich but corrupt. No, Mexico is like fairly poor for the average person, right? And like I said, I'm not. This often tends to come down to like distributive policies, right? Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Progressive tax rates and things like that. Nuclear energy, good. Budballing, okay? We should all be very pro nuclear energy. There is no argument otherwise. Alright? Even in the long term, we might have to, like, bury a bunch of nuclear waste, which is, like, not great. For now, it is absolutely the 100% most preferable alternative to climate disaster, while we develop more renewable technologies and stuff like that, and implement more, you know, hydroelectric and wind farms. We should absolutely be building nuclear power plants. We should absolutely be switching towards that. Yes, nuclear energy is great. It is really good. Okay, what we should do, we should be switching to nuclear energy now over the next, like, say, 30 years, and then within the next, say, 100, 150 years, we should be moving to completely renewables. But yeah, nuclear energy is fucking based.
Leisure activities is dizzying.
It draws concerns about privacy, about discrimination, even technically, given that we don't have a national healthcare system and therefore no database. So the question is not really, can the government do it? But if they legally collect it, which they could, how do they then collect it, store it? Who has access to that information, and what do they actually do with it?
So even though there's a distinction between how this is playing out in the UK and the US, you end up at the...
Sorry. Most nations with classes poor are extremely wealthy but massively corrupt, especially in the former Spanish colonies. That is true. A lot of South American governments are actually super duper corrupt. That is kind of true. But still, in terms of, like, GDP, social mobility, GDP per capita, average household income, they are much poorer nations. The standard of living is much lower, which is bad. And not only that, a lot of the countries in the global south are corrupt because they get intervened by stronger Western countries. See Bolivia, Venezuela, Cuba, most of Africa with China at the moment. Like, this is just how it plans out, right? All the banana republics in Central America in the 1950s, 1960s. This is just a thing, right? And this is because of, like, capitalist intervention or, like, Western motives that this happens, that these are corrupt, right? So for like Western profit and exploitation of the global south. So if we were investing in them rather than, like, consolidating power for our own benefits in the northern hemisphere, it would be much more beneficial for everybody involved. Fusion is about the nuclear power. I think we should invest research in that. Fusion at the moment is impossible. We don't know if we can do it, but yes, I agree. We should be researching into that. It is better than nuclear. It's just very difficult to do. They keep going to inventing a global issue. They don't invent global issues. They discover them. Like, what? It's not how you don't just make up an issue. You uncover the issue, right? If I recall correctly, I think the 2016 a team managed to get the net gain of energy from fusion. Perhaps, maybe. If they can do it and they can do it on a grand scale, that'd be great. Like, I think the problem with the reactors is they're incredibly expensive, right? And they're quite hard to maintain and potentially quite unsafe. whereas nuclear energy at the moment is incredibly safe, like way more safe than like pretty much any other form of energy. I think it's the end game energy source. The end game energy source is the Dyson field, and we need to be globalistic to accomplish that. Okay. South Korea successfully started a fusion reactor and it ran for a few seconds. It's very interesting. The climate changing is not that crazy. The climate changing at the rate that it is changing is that crazy. Yeah, that is pretty crazy, right? Like the Earth going through like various cycles over like hundreds of millions of years is not that crazy. But it changing that much in like 200 years, that's quite crazy, yeah. The Green Cartel? What the fuck is that? These statistics don't really show the full picture. All of these countries have internal corruption. If you just invest without focused income or profit, then the resources will just be stolen. This constantly happens with aid programs. That is true, actually. Do you know what? That's a very good point. But like I said, the reason these countries are like this is because of, like, Western intervention, right? Like, I don't mean to be like a fucking tanky here, but literally the CIA going over there and installing authoritarian governments and like puppets, basically. So like, this is kind of a problem that I think the West has made and the West should solve. I think the way to solve that is by sort of like empowering the people in those countries, making sure they're run democratically, and investing like in their economies from the bottom up, and incentivizing leftist or like socialist movements. Like for example in Bolivia, the standard of living has gone up exponentially since what the fuck is his name? Morales took power. And it is as a result of socialist policies, and they haven't had a problem with corruption in government. They haven't had a problem with this. They did have like CIA intervention, but they even managed to recover from that. And they're still on like a very good path at the moment. So I think that's the way forward, right? We incentivize leftist movements by investing in them and sort of propagating their growth. Dyson sphere, let's go, yeah. Saving nuclear energy is also expensive. That's why so many facilities are not at this needed standard. Yeah, that's true. And also, I know in smaller nations that don't have the money to invest in these things, they are very expensive and hard to maintain as well. Which is again just another bullet in the chamber for my argument that we should be investing in the Southern Hemisphere, investing in poorer countries to develop, build them a nuclear power plant, power their country with green energy. I think that's what we should be doing. The Green Cartel interests, which have been pushing for renewable energy so they could make money off solar energy, wind energy, and hydro energy, as opposed to, like, the oil lobby, which has been doing this for a lot longer, to more harm. Like, even if I can see this exist, it is still a preferable alternative. You understand that, right? Even if I can see that exist, it is still a preferable alternative, right? I would still go with that, even if there was sort of like some sort of like big corruption around people pushing green energy. I would still go for that.
Same endpoint. If you want to enjoy an ordinary life, you are going to require ID, and how that ID ultimately ends up being used is out of your hands. Once the technology exists, the problem exists. The pressure group Liberty warned that vaccine passports could create a two-tier society where unvaccinated people overlap too closely for comfort with those who are already marginalized and discriminated against. Vaccine uptake is lower in black and minority ethnic communities, often with good historical reasons to distrust authority figures. And I would say that
this is what I say, right? This is what I say, right? The distrust in authority and like the pursuance of liberty actually comes with a worse outcome, right? Not having black and minority ethnic communities, which is what we call it in the UK, unvaccinated, is having them unvaccinated is bad. It's really bad. It's bad for them. It's bad for other people, right? And this is the direct result of not having trust in institutions. So, you know, I understand why they have this distrust, because obviously that distrust has been earned. But it is crucial that we sort of put aside these differences, and the cycle of trust begins with giving. It begins with giving, and even repairing trust begins with forgiveness, right? I know it's difficult to forgive, and it's not like we should be lose all skepticism or questioning of authority or anything like that. That would be silly. But you can see that this is actually producing like a bad outcome. And we don't want that. We don't want this bad outcome. The only problem with the green cartel is that a lot of them care more about profit than being green. Quite frankly, I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. I'm absolutely okay with both of these things, right? If you live within a capitalist framework and you want to make profit and you want to do that via ethical means, i.e. promoting green energy, I don't think I have a problem with that, right? Even if you care more about profit than making things green, if making things green is the outcome of your profit seeking, I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that.
Extends to all of us. The fact is that all of us have a right to query and question authority. All of us know that governments make pledges and then rescind them. All of us know that big tech companies behave in ways that are questionable. And these are the very institutions that are going to be granted further power.
A good example is, how does the government ensure that your data is not shared with, let's say, police, immigration officers, employers?
Based on what we already know, how could we be certain that this information wouldn't be shared? Based on what we already know, why wouldn't they share it in that way? Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, figures that exposed the government's use of...
Well, like I said, we have checks on these things. We see, like, are they sending our data? And when it does, and it comes out that they're doing this, it becomes a big issue, and other people get mad about it, and as a result, a change comes about, and that's how the system's meant to work. That is how the system's meant to work. You find corruption, you see the corruption, you go, that's bad, and then the corruption stops. That's the point of it. That is the point of it. I mean, this is, I guess, like, this becomes more a conversation about whistleblowers at that point. Yes, I think whistleblowers are a good thing. That is how the system is meant to work. Do you know what, guys? I would love to continue this. However, it is my dinner time now, so we're going to raid somebody. Who should we raid? Who should we raid? Anybody got a suggestion for who we should raid? New socialist era? That sounds good. Come on. Somebody's got to have a suggestion. I agree with you about groups like the CIA. Ultimately, in the same way nationalism overthrew Western powers, it will take some effort to overthrow these governments and build reliable institutions. For example, in the Philippines, it's built a bigger sovereign state fund than most of the EU. However, no president can legally spend it as they have a law that prevents spending it. The reason they have this law is because they have such a problem with corruption. Yeah, that's what I mean, right? So, like, I understand it's like a complex issue, and it's obviously, it comes down case to case, but, like, generally speaking, I think my prescription for how to solve this was applicable across the board. One of those bikini bimbos paddling in a pool. I will die before I raid a titty streamer, okay? I will die. Baked Cupcake, have I ever met them? Do you know what? Fuck it, we're just going to raid Baked Cupcake. Alright, there was a guy on a game the other day called Baked Chef, and he was really nice to me, okay? So we're going to raid Baked Cupcake based on that premise, alright? I don't have a fucking clue what their opinions are. Alright? I don't have a fucking clue what their opinions are. But we're going to raid them. Anyway, thanks for coming today, guys. Thank you very much for being here. We will be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. GMT, as I always am. And it was good discourse. Good discourse. All right. I don't agree with you all in chat, but it's fun to engage with you. Okay. I think you're being good faith, even if you are wrong. So thanks for coming today, guys, and we'll see you tomorrow, hopefully.